As you probably suspected, I love films. I also, ironically enough, love cinema. At the core of all conflict are stories, right? And stories are the core of all films. Filmmakers tell stories, and increasingly, individuals have the power through various social media channels to mold and shape their own stories and then to project those visions onto the world. Welcome to the show. This is episode 8 of Earbud U. Shalin Sirkar is a creative whirlwind. She is a painter, writer, director, and producer of such films as Manesh, Paternoster, and many, many others. Based out of South Africa, Shalin is an incredible person who has created a vision of life, of justice, and has stepped out of her comfort zone repeatedly. I was excited to talk to her because I believe in the creative process, and I also believe in the project that encompasses the big vision. When we talk about conflicts, we talk about culture, identity, outlook, frames, and meanings. Now, it gets tricky when my identity rubs up against your identity. In film, those types of frictions, that rubbing up of identities and that buttressing of heads, controls and directs the creative process. However, sometimes it's a little too much, and then going to the balcony can help. When we take a break in a conflict and step back, we do more than just breathe in and out to open up the capillaries in our brains. We also take the time to think and determine what we need, how important what we need is, and to really consider what the other party needs. Now, this becomes a difficult thing because, well, sometimes we don't care about the other party, right? We don't care about their role in the conflict, and we really don't care about the outcome that they want. And this can create a larger struggle. And now a bit of the usual stuff. You can connect with Earbud U on Twitter at earbud_u. You can also check us out on Instagram. We tweet and post images on both of those social platforms underneath the hashtag #BePartOfTheShow. We're part of our parent company, Human Services Consulting and Training, based out of Endicott, New York. So, of course, go over and check out the HSCT website at www.hsconsultingandtraining.com. Now, check out Shalin Sirkar and her independent film work via her film company, Shalia Films, at www.chalia.co.za. That's www.chalia.co.za. She's on Facebook, and you can find her company, Shalia Films, there, and connect with her on Twitter as well. Look, really, you need to connect with this woman for all of your producing, writing, and directing interests and needs. Now, let's get into it.
Welcome to Earbud U. Get your knowledge on through your earbuds. Thank you all for listening today. This is episode 8. Our special guest for our show today is Shalin Sirkar, internationally known independent filmmaker, painter, and blogger. Shalin has used her talents and skills in a wide variety of areas to advocate for human rights, to advocate against racism and xenophobia, and has a compelling personal story based on growing up in South Africa. She's a great person that we connected with and we followed very actively through Twitter and through Human Services Consulting and Training, our parent company. We are very excited about the work that she does in the independent film area, and we love to help support female independent filmmakers. Welcome to Earbud U, Shalin. How are you doing this morning?
Hi, I'm doing great, thank you. Thank you very much for that really nice introduction.
Yeah.
So,
you're welcome. Yeah, not a problem.
and it's really nice to know that you are supporting independent female filmmakers. That's really nice to hear.
Well, absolutely. I think I personally love film. I love cinema. I get very, very excited about film and cinema. One of my passions is watching film. I love watching film. I was actually going through my basement just recently and doing some cleaning, and I found all my old DVDs. And my wife has now accused me of hoarding because I refuse to throw a DVD away. But I can't throw away my original copy of Darren Aronofsky's Pi. I can't throw that away. I have to keep that.
No, of course. that's sacrilege.
Exactly. Like, why would I throw that away? So yeah, I love film. I love all kinds of films, even in mainstream Hollywood films, all the way to independent films, and particularly the films of female independent filmmakers, because I think they have such and minority independent filmmakers. I think they cover and they come at subject matter with such a different lens and such an inverted lens, and I think that's a valuable and creative story to be told, not just in the United States, but throughout the world.
Okay.
So let's start off with sort of having you talk about yourself. What is it that you do exactly?
So I call myself an independent filmmaker, and basically what I do is I tell stories. And what I want to do is tell stories that I think are important, that need to be told, that are stories of people in real life that we don't really see because we are so used to these stories. It's such a big part of our lives, and so that's what I would say I do. I want to bring to the surface things about ourselves as human beings that we don't really notice. So I call myself an independent filmmaker because I've worked extensively in film, and previously what I did is I worked in the development process as a producer and a script consultant, and I worked with other international co-productions before I began writing my own script, and now I'm working as a director, and I'm currently writing and directing and producing stories which I've developed. So I also work as a consultant, and so I really enjoy helping people put together a film.
Excellent, awesome. That is a very eclectic sort of mix there, and I know film is a collaborative medium. I have a background in printmaking and drawing, which I've sometimes talked about with other guests on our show. And one of the functions of being a printmaker is being collaborative. So if you want to run a giant printmaking studio, say in the high desert of New Mexico, which is where a big printmaking studio is in the United States, you're going to want to get several people on board to help you churn out giant fine art prints that are going to be of high quality. So that collaborative process has to happen, and I was educated in that collaborative process. So it sounds like you wear a lot of hats. Talk us through the process of wearing those hats, and how does that work in bringing together a film or bringing together a project?
Okay, so those hats, I would call them that of the writer, the producer, and director. And, for me, a lot of people say, that it's better just to be a director or to write and direct and not to produce as well. But for me, I think that it's really important for a writer, a director to actually produce oneself, because nobody is really going to drive your project in the way and with the same passion that you have, and that way you always have your hands on it. That doesn't mean you're actively producing, but you're actually supporting your work in the way that you expect your producers to support you. So I think that's an important thing. So what I mean, what does that mean? That means that if I want to get my story told, I write my own work, and I need to produce it as well. So that means I go out and find other producers. I own my project, and I find co-producers. I initiate the conversations around financing the project. I initiate the conversations about bringing in a relevant creative crew, like other writers or the cinematographer, around the casting, etc. So I think that I wear more than one hat in that respect. As a consultant, what I've done is I've worked for other people and for projects which I've been a co-producer on as a script consultant, as well as I've advised various other producers in an international context about what it's like to shoot in South Africa, or what it's like to shoot in Germany, or how one goes about accessing funds in South Africa, or how one goes about accessing funds in Europe, and which funds are available, and how you could go about packaging your finance for your film. And so I'm busy doing all these type of things.
Awesome. Yeah, well, that opens up a question that, didn't necessarily make my list, but it kind of dovetails with what we're talking about here. what are the differences between sort of filmmaking and shooting in South Africa versus Germany? What are some structural differences? What are some financing differences? What are some just cultural differences that you sort of have to walk maybe your client through as a consultant, or even that you have to walk through as a person trying to get a project up off the ground?
Well, the major difference between Germany or even Europe and South Africa, but especially Germany, is that there's a lot more support here from financially, as well as for the auteur, for the artist. There's a real understanding about what it is like for an artist to be coming out and to be projecting one's style and to tell one story in one's own way. So I think one of the questions that you had posed to me was an artist as an entrepreneur, and that is really supported in Germany. Whereas I think in South Africa, there's still a lot of struggle around that. I think artists really find it difficult to be an entrepreneur. And to go back to answering your question, the reason for that is because of the support that you have here in Germany, which you don't have in South Africa. So in South Africa, you have one national institution called the National Film and Video Foundation, which aims to support young filmmakers. They are currently in development with one of my projects. But the kind of support I receive in South Africa is very limited compared to the kind of support I have here. So if a filmmaker, an American filmmaker, had to come to me and say to me, okay, where would you suggest I co-produce? Would you suggest I co-produce with Germany or South Africa, and why? Then my answer would be, well, Germany has various funds. They have a national fund. They have a fund in each of the states. Not every state has a fund, but they have funds in different states. The money, though, has to be spent here. So you would get the money here and you would shoot here, or you would use crew from here, or you'd use equipment from here, or you would use post-production here. And so, in South Africa, you have like your tax rebates, which are favoring international filmmakers who want to shoot in South Africa, and you have the National Film and Video Foundation. So it's not very much, to be honest. You have another institution which is called the IDC, which is basically a bank that funds filmmakers as well, and they do various other things. But independent filmmaking is still very young in South Africa. So I think they've got like a really long way to go before they can really understand what it's like to support filmmakers. What they do have, what is really strong in South Africa, is if you're a commercial filmmaker, or if you're a filmmaker who's got your script and you've got your story and you've got your creative elements or your crew and your cast, and you are not your crew, sorry, just your cast, but you want to go to South Africa and use South Africa as a location and use the crew there and use equipment there, then South Africa is really top notch in that way, and they offer all the services in a really expert way. And then I would say that artists are not as supported in South Africa as they are in Germany, but more commercial ventures are more supported in South Africa, and they are to a great extent supported here in Germany too, in Berlin especially. And in terms of the cultural differences, there are huge cultural differences. And I hear this when I speak to people who shot in South Africa, who are German, or vice versa. So there is a lot more. How can I put it? There's just a different cultural outlook. What am I trying to say? Yeah.
Just sort of. I don't want to tell you to finesse it, but just sort of say what you're thinking there. I don't know where you're going, but just say what you're thinking there.
Yeah. Well, what I want to say is like the style of the people are different in South Africa versus Germany. So if you're German, you're coming to South Africa and you want to shoot there, and you bring your own style and you bring your own way, and you have these expectations from your supporting crew in South Africa, then you have clashes, and very often you have this, and you hear of these stories. And it's not necessarily the case with Americans going to shoot in South Africa, because somehow, I don't know, it's the Anglophile versus the continental.
Yeah. Yep.
So.
Yep. Well, and the model you're describing in some ways is similar to the model that I see with independent filmmaking here in America, but in a lot of ways it's different because we over here in America didn't nationalize our film companies. We never did that, and so you got a lot of domestic film companies that are global brands, particularly at the commercial level. But then you have, and they all crowd out the independent filmmakers, and then you have the independent filmmakers who are struggling just to, like you say, get a tax rebate from a particular state, like and a tax rebate in the state of Louisiana to shoot something is going to be different than a tax rebate in the state of Mississippi, which is right across the border, or a tax rebate in the state of New York is going to be different than a tax rebate in the state of Montana. But if you're an independent filmmaker in Montana, that could be a huge thing to have to overcome, because you're right, you have to get the financing first. So that model, in that way, it's similar. You have to get the financing, you have to get the producer, you have to get the crew, you have to get all these things lined up before you can get the money. It's the sort of the entrepreneurial. It's an invert of the entrepreneurial chicken and egg thing, So you got to get the money to make the money, But you don't have any money, so how do you go out there and get the money? And I'm assuming it's a similar thing when you're working in Europe, or in South Africa, from what you've described.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very familiar with that sort of difficulty. It's kind of the definition of my life for the last 10 years. So it's. It is very much that in South Africa. Well, they very much in South Africa. It's very much about helping young filmmakers like myself and various others to develop their films. But the way in which they go about offering that support, I feel, is very limited, and has actually hampered my own creative process. So, and various other filmmakers, that you speak to who have had the support feel that. Whereas that's the other huge difference between Germany and South Africa, is that that kind of support is not hampered here. So, in Germany, if they were to offer you developmental support, it's very open-minded. They really favor the artists and allow the artists to be as free as they would like. Whereas in South Africa, South Africa's governmental fund has lost so much of money with giving the artists their own, favor, that they've taken a very conservative approach. And what they do is they really tailor your development process. And in effect, it usurps the creative voice of the filmmaker, which is in fact quite disturbing. So it comes back to that: do you want their money
right.
to make your film, or do you want to tell your film like the way you do? And these are questions that are very much in the foreground of my own process. So right now, as I mentioned, I'm in the development of a feature film, which has the working title Home Sweet Home, which is to be shot in South Africa using just a South African crew and a South African cast. But it has a German co-producer, and it has a German sales agent, which is an international sales agent. But I do need some support from South Africa. I do need some money from South Africa, and I would like the recognition from South Africa.
South Africa.
Yeah, but to actually to get that, they basically telling me that I got to rewrite my whole script, and yet my script is really approved and loved by various other people. So they want me to go back and change it so that it fits into some kind of Hollywood model. And so it's really interesting. And so I've been in a struggle with that over the last year, and I'm considering giving back the money and getting my finance only in Europe for the film that I will shoot only in South Africa.
Well, how do you? Well, let's sort of take a little bit of a left turn here, and let's talk about sort of growing up. Talk about your background. How did you decide that this was going to be for you? How did you decide that, hey, this is the career path that I want to take? How did you? I mean, it wasn't like you woke up one day when you were. Well, maybe you did. Maybe you woke up one day when you were 10 and you watched a Godard film and you were like, hey, I can do this. Or maybe it didn't happen that way, but sort of walk us through, how did you decide that independent filmmaking was going to be for you?
It's actually quite different from most people. So basically, I had no interest in film. and until I was about 24.
Okay, so you're what they call a late bloomer.
Well, yeah, well, not even. I wouldn't even call it that because I had other interests. So basically, what I did is I studied law and psychology, and I have a basic degree in law and psychology, and then I went on to study philosophy and politics with economics. And
Ooh, you're like a quadruple threat there, a tetrahedral threat, actually.
yeah, so I did that in my postgraduate course. But what I was doing throughout the time, well, since I was about 11, was I was acting in theater, and I always enjoyed acting in theater. But what happened is that when I moved to Cape Town, so I grew up in Pietermaritzburg, which is in KwaZulu-Natal, and in a very closed Indian community, and didn't have really much access to things that were white or black, or a platform in which to do what I needed to do. Although when I went to university, I was acting and in theater there, and then I had a broader outreach. But when I went to Cape Town, I wanted to continue acting in theater because I loved it. But the theater was very closed. It was very, very white and very close, and there was no space for me. And I ended up working as I continued studying, and I worked at a research institute. But in this, in the background, I was wanting to act. And what I did is I worked as an interviewer for a parliamentary service television. So I interviewed NGO directors and various members of parliament, talking to them about policy, etc. And then what I did is I got a job as a production assistant. And I was asking the producers, well, why isn't there anything for me? Why isn't there anything for my skin color? And now we're talking about it's changed since then. So we're talking about 1999, 1998, 1999, 2000. This was a year where, apartheid was finished, but you still, as somebody of my skin color, in Cape Town, I couldn't get any work at all that would put me on the stage or put me in front of the camera. So actually, what one of the filmmakers who I was working for said to me was that, look, there's nothing for you. Okay, if you want to be on the screen, then you should write and produce and direct your own stuff, and then you can act in it too.
Whoa, okay.
and this is what I was told. And at that point, I was like, okay, well then, go to hell. Maybe that's what I'll do. And so I continued to study. I finished my postgraduate degree, and then I began a master's in rhetoric of film, and I continued to work in the industry because that was I realized that I could work on quite a few productions and earn like a nice chunk of money, and then I could continue studying and pay, for the apartment and the bills and all that. And so I continued to do that until I got the opportunity to work as a trainee producer on a film called Forgiveness, which had its premiere in Locarno, and in I think 2004. And so I got to work as a trainee producer there, and they completely exploited me. They did.
They're like, look at this sucker. She thinks she knows about the law and psychology and economics. We're going to show her.
Yeah, it was awful. Like, there was really a lot of that kind of attitude, because it's very rough, the industry. There's a very military style and very rough, and they have no appreciation for anyone who has any intellectual ideas. So.
Well, you got to go through the fire, right? I mean, you do. You got to walk through the fire to come out the other side, so.
And that's what I did. So I actually worked on that, and I really enjoyed it. And then it just so happened that the following year, I started getting a lot of opportunities to be a producer with international co-productions, like with Canada, with India, with Germany, with Italy. And so that's when I set up Charlia Films as a vehicle through which to run these productions and to be able to access funds in South Africa and to pay the taxes and all that. So this is how I started Charlia Films, and then I continued for at least 5 or 6 years to work as a co-producer in international productions and basically offer my input in terms of the script development and etc. But actually, the sad story with that is that I was never really able to produce any of those films in South Africa because I never got funding for any of those films in South Africa. So, I fell off as a South African producer because I couldn't bring funds to the process. But I did work on them on a developmental capacity. So that was really, that helped me grow as well.
Well, you talked about sort of being 10 years away from apartheid, the apartheid system, and from the perspective of, and I don't want you to tell how old you are, but I'm 35 this year, and so in 1999 I was like 2 years out of high school, and so for me, in America, growing up in America and in an American context, and at the time I went to high school in the American South, and so while it wasn't an apartheid system, it was a post-Jim Crow, still in the late 90s, a post-Jim Crow system down south in Louisiana. And yeah, my apologies to everybody who's going to be listening to this who knew me when I lived in Louisiana. But, I mean, that's sort of the reality of the American South. Now, there's an arc where certain areas of the American South are coming out of that, but it's happening slowly. They're still fighting the Civil War down there in some parts, though, But talk to me about sort of being 10 years away from the apartheid system. I mean, that was a brutal system, and what we saw in America, or at least what I saw in the media and on television as a child growing up, was sort of the brutality of that, and then the system collapsed, and then there was Nelson Mandela. And those are the only two sort of poles we have in this country. And I like how you talk about sort of growing up in that closed Indian community. And I knew there was an Indian community based upon the life of Gandhi and all that. But, after Gandhi leaves and you only find out about Gandhi in India, you don't really find out any more about Gandhi in South Africa, and so, or the people that he left behind. And so we didn't really hear a whole lot about the Indian South African experience in relation to the crumbling sort of that apartheid system. You lived through that, or you grew up through that, I would assume anyway, and if I'm wrong, let me know. But, you grew up through that and lived through that and have had to endure through that in your filmmaking process. What was that like for you?
Okay, so apartheid ended in 1994, and so we're 20 years away from apartheid now.
Okay,
But and yes, I grew up in apartheid South Africa. I lived. So I'm 37 now, and I was still was in my final year of high school when the first democratic election took place in South Africa, and I was too young to vote. I was 17, so I wasn't able to vote. But so basically, it was. I lived a fairly sheltered life, and I think that was what apartheid is really about. It's really about sheltering, the white and the Indian and the colored, so-called colored community in South Africa, and keeping everyone away. Keeping the black people in an enclave, and keeping everyone else in different enclaves. And so, if there's one word that really describes it, it's sheltered. And that's how I grew up, in a very sheltered way, and also living in an Indian community which was really interested in prolonging the traditions and the culture, and they really hung on very tightly to that. So I grew up in this kind of Orthodox Hindu family with with this Indian tradition, and my life was very different until I started university. My first year of university was the only time I got to be around people of color. Whether they be white or mixed race or black. And other than that, I went to an Indian school and was at home with my family, and the community that we lived in, just where with it's apartheid, so it was like just Indian people, and so it that was like, I don't know, it was the kind of goals and values that people have really shape you as you're growing up. So in that kind of community, it was really important for people to be, to grow up to have some kind of status. Like, so to be like a lawyer or a doctor or having some kind of status like this was important. And those are the kind of things that your parents would have wanted you to do. And so doing something like filmmaking was so far off. There was something. Firstly, the government during apartheid was in complete control of the media. Everything was white and Afrikaner. There was no even access point. I didn't even dream about working in television when I was a teenager. and perhaps on some level that's quite short-sighted, but I didn't, I never imagined it. And then, I mean, things obviously changed, but they changed very slowly. Like, so in Cape Town, there is still, until this day, a struggle between the people of color and the white community, which dominate the film industry. I mean, there are constantly people complaining about it, and there's.
But do you find being as an Indian raised in that closed community, do you find you have a voice at the table in those kinds of discussions, or does the filmmaking sort of carve out that voice for you?
You know, I wish that the filmmaking would carve out that voice for me, and that's what my wish is, but it isn't, because you've got to jump through all these hurdles about financing your film, and then you've got to jump through all those political hurdles too, and it's racist. I mean, I'm supposedly now privileged because I'm a so-called black female filmmaker, and I would have lots of opportunities. But in reality, it isn't like that, because there's a lot of antagonism towards me because I'm Indian and I'm not Zulu or Sotho or something. And there's a lot of that. So I wouldn't say that it ultimately. I think if I just took my phone and I shot some movies on that, then I would be an empowered filmmaker.
You just loaded it up to YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. Really. Then I would have my voice out there, but I'm too much of a perfectionist to do that. So I don't do it. But I think that is far more empowering than doing what I'm doing, because what I'm trying to do is go through the system, work through the system, which is in fact, built to oppress, and get through that and to be able to tell my stories. But yes, I don't think I completely answered your previous question. So.
Well, no, I mean, I think you did a really good job, because I was sort of getting to the. I find it interesting in multi-ethnic countries like America or like South Africa or like Brazil or any multi-ethnic country in the world, where there's polarities and there's sort of these artificial polarities, but in reality there's multiple polarities, and there's multiple voices that need to be heard at the table. And because as a conflict resolution guy, I run into so many people that want it to be, for the purposes of this interview, this is going to sound trite, but they want it to be either black or white. They're not interested in hearing multipolarities because they're not interested in all the grays that go along with that. I'm fascinated by the grays that go along with that, and by the voices that are heard and the voices that aren't heard, and how do we get all those voices to the table. And so, I see filmmaking as a way to sort of get those voices heard. And I want to take the time to sort of encourage you, because, going through the system, you are breaking down those barriers and you are getting that voice at the table, even if at least I believe you are, even if you don't get success, boom, right off the bat there. I think it's a gradual process, and that's the easy work would be to film it on your phone and upload it to YouTube, and you'll sort of have it go viral and all that kind of stuff. The hard work is working through the system and sort of chipping away at those edifices that have been built over time, and proving to people that even though she failed at this thing, she's still going to be persevering in this other area. So, I think you're to be commended for that.
Yeah, but that also, begs the question: is the old system outdated? Is it time just to go with YouTube, Vimeo, Vivo, and
sure?
Should we not just embrace these media and go with it?
Well, let's talk about. Now we're kind of a little bit off of our question list here, but let's talk about the new media. What do you like out there? Do you like Vimeo and YouTube? Do you like sort of the new things that independent filmmakers are sort of doing, where they're taking these new tools, and some of them are pro-social tools, some of them aren't, but they're taking these tools and they're doing either really, really funny things or really, really compelling things, and they're sort of putting it out there for free to the world. What do you think about that?
Well,
both from a producer hat and from a consulting hat? Like, what do you think about that?
I think it's great. It's my daily consumption. I love it. I'm living upon it. 5 years ago, I was living a different life. I was walking out more in the forest. Most of my my time, online on YouTube, Vimeo, etc. I mean, I think it's great. I think it's really amazing, and it's really great. And the more people could get out and tell, speak their voices, get their voices heard, the better it is. Because I think like one of the major problems in our society today is that there's still so much of levels of oppression going on, whether it is your veiled woman in Saudi Arabia or whether it's, your young Indian woman in India who's forced to marry, or whether it's just, whatever it is. It's not just about women and in Eastern countries, or there's levels of oppression that exist everywhere. And I think that ultimately what Vimeo and YouTube and all these other mobile sites actually offer people, not just mobile sites, but these sites that offer online, videos, I think what it offers is people to heal. It's people to reach out to each other with their experiences and to heal. Just to realize that, in fact, you're not alone. You're not the only one going through that. You're not the only one dealing with that, because yes, you could get that information in books, but I think it's far more difficult. Your videos are instantaneous, and you can reach out to somebody across the world who's having the same existential crisis that you are having.
Right. But then again, you could also reach across the world and see a cat video 12,000 times.
If that's what you choose,
Well, and how do you? One of the things that I struggle with as a person who produces content on digital platforms through blogging, and then through this podcast, and eventually I'll go to video as well. But one of the things I struggle with is how do I cut through the noise of the cat videos and of the sort of the clickbait on Facebook, that shows up in your feed, like click on this video and it'll change your life in 30 seconds. You won't believe what I mean. Like, give me a break, And then I click on the video and it's not something that's going to change my life, And I sort of struggle with how do you cut through the noise to tell that significant story that's gonna cause that unity to occur. It's going to cause those people to sort of join together. I don't know how to do that. Maybe you could tell me. I don't know.
Jesan, if I knew that answer, I think I would have figured it all out actually. But I think that one of the things that I've recently discovered is you got to know what you want. Mm-hmm. So you got to know what you're looking for. I think as somebody who's putting out the content, it's more difficult. But as a consumer, if you know what you want, then you can cut through all the noise. You go directly to what you want. And so it's more about people. I think it's more about people making choices which are better for them, and which help them, which is just generally better for them, as opposed to dumbing down them, And
right.
So I'll give you an example. Like in the recent months, I've really taken to watching a lot of videos online that give you like monthly horoscope and your monthly tarot, etc. So like I've always had an interest in tarot and in astrology. In fact, I am a tarot reader, and I do that professionally on the side. And so I've always had an interest in astrology. And so what I did is I decided I was going to spend like a fair deal of time watching the various astrology scopes that are put out by various different people and do a comparison of them and see what they say. And I've also then learned a lot about astrology in the meantime. But what I found is that these people, they all have their niche audiences. Like one person has like 13,000 subscribers, another one maybe has 3,000 subscribers, but they have their audiences. So like the audiences exist out there. It's just about you putting out what you need to put out in a very clear, concise way to reach a very niche audience, and then your audience will come to you, because more and more people are figuring out exactly what they want, and they're going for it, as opposed to just trying to just play games or whatever.
Right. Well, and you know what, as a person who creates content, and I talk to a lot of other people who create content, and you know this as a person who creates and produces content, the frustration is, how do I get this content to the right audience? How do I get this content to those 13,000 people? And where are those 13,000 people? And how can I get them out of the millions of people that are also producing, well, not millions maybe, but the other, hundreds of thousands of people, or even just tens of thousands of people who are also producing this content. But as a consumer, you're right. On the flip side, you're absolutely right. And I see it from both sides. That's my mediator brain. I see it from both sides. So as a consumer of content, you're right. I know exactly what I know not to click on the video in my Facebook feed. Like, I know not to do that, and I know I'm savvy enough to know if I want to go on YouTube, like I'm working on a project right now, looking at a bunch of how-to videos for building webinars and things like that in sort of a really kind of offbeat way. And so I'm looking at how to build these webinars in this offbeat way from other people who are doing it. And you're right. I see that they've got, 300,000, not even 300,000, but like 30,000 likes or 13,000 likes or 3,000 likes or, whatever it is on YouTube. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at this video and I'm replaying it over and over. And I'm thinking, how did this person really grab that audience? So I'm thinking about that from the marketing perspective and from the content creator perspective, but then I'm also thinking, hey, I'm part of this audience now. I really appreciate what this person's doing, and it's having those two minds that's sort of driving me right now. So you're right about niche audiences. Well, talk to me about how your films fit into what is the niche audience that you're looking for, and then also talk to me about who your mentors are. Those are two different questions, but who are some of your mentors that sort of helped you come up, or did you just sort of do this organically? You sort of just take the reins of this and wrangle it yourself?
Okay, so the mentor question. The word mentor has never really been part of my vocabulary. I don't have mentors. I have people who have inspired me. I've had circumstances that have inspired me. So one of the things that I mentioned to you earlier, when this woman who I was working for at the time said to me that, if you want to be on screen, if you want to be cast in a role on screen, then go write and direct and produce your own stuff. Like, that's something that inspired me. It made me want to go out there and get it. I wouldn't call her my mentor, but then I proceeded to have a work relationship with them, in which I brought finance to one of their projects called 34 South is the name of the film. It was, in fact, at the Pan-African Film Festival in LA. And then I got totally screwed over by them financially. And so, these are things that I've learned from. And I guess, I've been inspired by it. I've been inspired to do better, to do differently, to not to make the same mistakes. And then, I think if I've had one mentor or one person that's truly inspired me, because having a mentor, somebody who's you kind of really follow them. I think you really love them and their work, but I don't have that relationship with anyone in the world. But I do think that Carl Baumgartner, who's recently passed away, he was one of the co-producers in my film Menesh, and he was one of the, he was a producer of Aki Kaurismäki and Jim Jarmusch and Jane Campion, and he supported a lot of independent film, and he was like a really strong voice for independent cinema in Europe, and also independent cinema coming out from obscure corners of the world. And he really supported people like Pan Nalin with his film Samsara, and he supported me. And I think that if there's anyone who's truly inspired me in terms of the type of work that I do, the type of cinema that I'm engaged in, it's Carl Baumgartner, and he was known as Baumi. And it's really his death has really been a loss to us all. And so. And generally, I'm quite inspired by various other directors. So, like yesterday, I met with a producer, Sanjay Shah, from India. He lives between India and Australia, and I recently came across a film that he's one of the producers on called Labor of Love, which is in the Venice Days this year at Venice, and I was in the process of trying to do the gap financing for it because it has a shortfall. And if I did, I would have been also one of the co-producers on it. And but I wasn't able to do that, and I'm still in the process of trying to find the project a sales agent, as well as distribution. And like just speaking to him was an inspiration, because we're on the same page and there's somebody out there who's trying to do something that I'm trying to do, and that's really nice. And just like watching the film Labor of Love and I really enjoyed this film and seeing how it was made, etc. So they're like little things that inspire me, like Lars von Trier is somebody who's always inspired me, and he was also
really,
yeah, he's
I have not seen Nymphomaniac yet, by the way. I'm sort of hesitant to sort of watch it. I had to get through Melancholia first, but yeah, go ahead. I had to slog through that first, and I'm sort of hesitant. Like my wife doesn't particularly care for things like that or for subject matter like that, so I have to be sort of. And I got little kids, so I got to sort of like navigate around that entire thing. I got to figure out times to schedule the next Lars von Trier film, but
yeah, exactly. It's like 5 hours out of your time. I also have not watched Nymphomaniac as yet, but for instance, Lars von Trier's company is Entropa Entertainment. Is actually one of the co-producers of my short film as well, and his work I've never necessarily liked it, but it's really been. It's something that I've thought about for a long, long time. After I watched Antichrist, I thought about it for about 2.5 years.
Wow.
And so if you think, I wouldn't call him my mentor in any way, but I would say that his work inspired me to think about it at such a level. There's another director, he made this film called Aurora. It was in Cannes in, I don't remember the year, maybe 2010 or 2009. Goodness, he's not Hungarian. Sorry, I forgot.
It's okay. We'll look it up afterward. We'll get it. We'll bring it in.
Okay. Well, what I wanted to say about it, the film. Okay, I hated it when I watched it. So I watched it in Cannes. I hated it. I knew they were co-producers of it, and it was, I really hated this film. But you know what? It inspired me so intensely that I wrote a manuscript based on it. So. Mm-hmm. It's basically So this is what I mean. And this is what I.
No, that's good. No, I mean, well, and then the next question I had, the question I had before that about mentorship was niche audiences. Which goes sort of to authenticity. You're a deep well, Shalin, and you've got a lot of stuff inside of that well, a lot of life experiences, a lot of perspectives. How do you find that niche and remain authentic not only to the brand but also to your film and to your subject matter? How do you do that? How do you find your niche audience and remain authentic?
I think that authenticity isn't something that you can do. I think you either have it or you don't, And I think part of being authentic or having my authenticity come through in my work is really constantly questioning myself and asking myself about my path and asking myself if I'm being honest with myself. And I think, if I can be clear and in integrity with myself, then that will come through in my work. I don't think it's something that you can control. I don't think it's something you can brand. I don't think it's something that you can plan. I think it's either it comes through or not. And just in terms of finding my niche audience, I have no idea. This is like a blank spot for me. Or a blind spot, sorry. That's what it is for me. Because that's just an area of my work that I haven't been able to figure out. Like, that's the first question people ask you when you pitch a project, like, who is your audience? And
right.
Me is like, my audiences are the people who like my work, my films. Because I'm not making genre films. I'm not making horror films. Right. Okay, I have, the whole horror audience in the world.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. My niche audience is female South Africans, 37 years old, of Indian descent. That's my audience.
Yeah, it's like I'm making a film about a pedophile. Yeah, my audience is a bunch of pedophiles because I want to get them to change their mind.
Right.
Like what? And I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know how to answer it, and I constantly am asked that. I still don't know how to answer it. And I wish that I had. I wish I could afford a marketing consultant or somebody who could advise me about how to build my audience and how to reach my audience. But this is, as I said, my blind spot. Yeah.
Well, I could probably help you out with that. I know a ton of marketing people internationally that are doing really, really good work. I could probably connect you with at least a couple of people. But I don't know. One of the things that I do consulting as part of my business model as well. And one of the things I'm consistently asked is, who's your audience? Who's your audience? Who's your audience? Who's your audience? Who's your market? Who's your target market? And particularly during the first year of my business last year, that was the drumbeat question. And I got so frustrated with that question. I started just saying, the person who I'm talking to is my audience. Like that's my audience. I'm talking to you right now about this project or about this idea or about this resolution to a conflict. You're my audience right now. Now it's your job to go out and find me other people. So go forth and do that. It sort of be like that because I do. I agree. It's if you're making unconventional things and you're trying to find, like, I don't know if you know who Seth Godin is, the marketer, if you're familiar with any of his writing. Okay. So yeah, he talks about, the long tail, right? So finding the people on the long tail that are going to like your stuff and pay you for it, and as the long tail becomes longer and longer, the second piece of the hard work, other than just sort of walking through the edifice that's already been built up and trying to tear that down, the second piece becomes trying to find who is on that long tail that's gonna give you money and give you not only a referral and continue to give you business, but also give you attention.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, I think that the whole world is our audiences, right? We create stuff to put it out there for everyone to appreciate. And so, I think that your response is really apt in that respect. And I think what I ought to do is probably spend more time reading some of Seth Godin's work, in order to be able to get some ideas about.
Well, Mitch Joel put some good things out there. I'll give him a plug. He put some good things out there. He's Canadian, so it's not all an American thing. Mitch Joel put some good things out there. He's doing some good work. You're right. The whole world is our audience, and we have the tools now for the whole world to sort of become our audience. Well, we've had a really good conversation here. I've really enjoyed talking with you. Let's sort of wrap this up by talking about sort of and you've talked about differences. You've talked a lot about sort of what the differences are between filmmaking in the Anglophile world versus filmmaking everywhere else. And you've touched on that. Is there anything you'd like to go deeper into that? Because you said you were working with a young man or a person from Australia. And, so now you got Australia, you got Germany and the rest of Europe, you got South Africa. That's a lot of different places. How do you leverage all that, with the differences in filmmaking? Or is there one commonality between all of them, like getting the financing and getting the funding? Is that the one commonality and then everything else is just sort of cultural and political?
Yeah, there's two parts to that question. So basically, I find partners who are able to help me bring a certain portion of finance into a project, but I think just finding people who are like-minded or on the same page with one from an artistic point of view, or just to be able who appreciate cinema in a certain type of way, that are willing to put a product out there that is not just about making money or entertainment, but just like the art form. So for me, that's my common thing. I try to look for people who really appreciate my point of view, or people who have no interest in my point of view, but who have access to funds and who won't bother me, or won't not bother me, but who will just allow me free reign in terms of the artistic stuff.
Right.
But
yeah, give me the money and leave me alone.
Exactly. I mean, that's ideal, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, how do you Well, what are some of your favorite like contemporary filmmakers? You know, you mentioned being on YouTube and being on Vimeo and sort of sucking all that stuff up. Who are some of your favorite filmmakers working right now that are sort of outside the social space, who sort of made that leap to quote unquote the big screen? You know, who are some of your favorite filmmakers that are working right now? Or do you have any? I mean, you know, or it's fine to say, yeah, no, you know what, no. But I mean, who are you inspired by? I mean, you mentioned Lars von Trier, and that's definitely an influence there. I can see, well, like you said, whether positive or negative. The person who directed Aurora, that was Christy Pugh.
That's exactly, yes, he.
Yep.
So I found his name later. So I love the work of Bellatar.
Okay.
Bellatar, he's a Hungarian. Christy Pugh is Romanian.
Yep.
Bellatar is a Hungarian director. His work is, I think, really beautiful and amazing. I like the work of Turkish director whose name escapes me now, but he made a film called Honey. He made like a trilogy, Honey, Milk, I think, and I'm not sure the other one. Bal is the Turkish name for it. I can't remember his name, but I've met him several times. I just quickly Google it. He's had his film Semi Kaplan Nuglu. That's his name. His film Bal won the Berlinale Bear in 2010, and so I like his work. I don't have like a really favorite filmmaker whose work I'm like looking out for right now. I try to keep an eye out for what's coming up. So I'm really keen to see Fatih Akin's new film, The Cut, in Venice, and and I want to see what that's about. And I don't have that many favorites. I'm just more, you know, I keep an eye out about what's going on, and if I really like a film, I maybe tweet about it or I write about it. There was a film I watched last year in Venice. It was called, what is it called? It was called Lock. They've since changed the title of the film. That was a brilliant, brilliant film. And I would love to see the work of the next director. His name escapes me. Tom Hardy acted in it. And
it was Stephen Knight.
Steve, that's it, right? Thank you. And he's worked, and he's made other stuff, but Stephen Knight, but this film was really, really good. And And
I really like Tom Hardy too. I got to admit that I really do. I think I watched what was the movie about the guy in the gentleman in British prison. I just watched it like maybe 6-8 months ago. Anyway, he was huge in that film. I really loved the way he sort of, and then of course, The Dark Knight, or Dark Knight Rises or whatever it was, with Nolan, who I love. I love Christopher Nolan, and I think he's an anachronism in an age of digital where he just continues to shoot on film, and sort of shaking his fist at everybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I wanted to see Locke. I definitely, like I said, I like Tom Hardy, and Stephen Knight looked like he was doing some really amazing things in that film.
You really ought to see it and get it out there. It was like, it's really one really brilliant film. It's I haven't seen like films that should really move me. And the thing is that I was never really one who I was never really a cinephile, but over the years I've grown to have a real appreciation for films, and so now I try to watch really good ones. But I found in the last year, the last couple of years, having a child and having to when I go to film festivals like Cannes or Venice or to the Berlinale, I have a babysitter taking care of my child when I'm at my meetings, and then I tend to skip films rather than watch it because I want to spend a bit of time with my daughter, and not just like be, gone for 12 hours in the day. And so This is, unfortunately, in the last couple of years, I haven't watched as many films as I would like to. The film Lunchbox by Ritesh Batra is also a film that's okay. That's not a film to be passed. And I think that basically rounds it up in terms of my yeah, but not Lars von Trier. Like Lars von Trier, as I said, I have a love-hate relationship with these films. The one film which I really loved of Lars von Trier is one of his earliest films. I have a real problem remembering names of films of people. So it was one of his earlier films. It had what's this actor?
It wasn't like The Element of Crime or like something like that. It wasn't that early.
No, it was I think from the 80s. If I can just do you have a list of his films in front of you?
Oh yeah, I mean let's see, his films from the 1980s. Befressabelder. I just butchered that because I don't speak German. But The Element of Crime, Epidemic, and then Medea, which was a TV movie.
Yeah, it's not that, although that was pretty good as well. It was Down from the Dark.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Europa, which was in 1991. The Teacher's Room, which was a TV series that he put together. Breaking the Waves.
Yeah, Breaking the Waves was one of these other ones. But it's not any of these films. It's another one. It's got and the reason I want to, it's like a film that so intensely inspired me. Still can't find it. It's like a theater space that it's set in, and it's acted out in there. It's got this the actor in it. His name is Paul something, which I also got. I'm really sorry. Dogville.
Okay, yeah.
Dogville is like one of my, of course, Nicole Kidman. So Dogville is one of my favorite films, and and yet I don't remember it. It's awful, but it's one of my favorite films, and one of the films that's truly inspired me. So yeah, and just generally speaking, I enjoy the films of Aki Kaurismäki and Abbas Kiarostami as well.
Yeah. Well, wrapping up here, you mentioned working the film circuit. We didn't really touch on that. If we have you back again, I'd love to talk about sort of working the film circuit and what that's like. Venice and Cannes and sort of that whole culture. And how do you work the film circuit? Is that something that I'm fascinated by? And we didn't mention this, but I'd like to give you a couple of minutes here at the end to sort of talk about how do you balance. And you're a very ambitious woman. You got a lot of goals. How do you balance that with? And I ask every entrepreneur this, not just women. So this is sort of a universal question. But how do you balance that with just life, just living life? I know you said you're into tarot and astrology and things like that. How do you get hobbies and life and other stuff and balance that with your work?
Yeah, I think to a large extent it's not been very balanced in the last years. So I spent a lot of time, like if you want to make headway, you really got to spend like a lot of time working. And unfortunately, fortunately, I think that life is more important than work. So I spend a great deal of time relaxing and enjoying the time that I have with my family as well. So that is that's where my balance comes in. It's that I spend my family life is what grounds me and brings me back into focus about what's really important in life. And then but I do spend like a lot of my free time just like studying tarot and studying Norse mythology and Indian mythology and studying reading Noam Chomsky. So I have other interests, and I spend a lot of my spare time reading upon that, and I love hiking. So when I get a chance to do that, I love to do that. My daughter's still very young now, and I can't get her to march up a mountain. But but give it a couple more years, and
give it a couple more years, yeah.
Yeah, and otherwise, one of my passions is sailing. But where I'm living right now, I don't get to do very, very much of that. But I'm moving back to Cape Town in a month from now, and I'm hoping to have a bit more time and balance in my life with more hiking and more sailing and that's pretty much that. And then what was the question that you asked me? You were mentioning about the festival circuit.
Yeah, the festival circuit. Yeah, I mean, and that's that's, a really sort of long and involved, I would imagine a long and involved answer, because there's a lot of, I would assume there's differences in just navigating Venice versus Cannes and all those.
Yeah, there is. There are huge differences in navigating them, and being in a festival is really essential, I think, for an independent filmmaker to be able to find the right people to be able to engage with and begin co-productions with, and to be able to familiarize yourself with who the financiers are and what the latest trends are, etc. And that is really a huge involved discussion. We can do that another time if you'd like that.
Absolutely. I would love to continue talking with you. Well, let's wrap up for today. Thank you very much, Shalin, for taking time to talk with us today here on Earbud U. You can follow us on Earbud U on Twitter at EarbudU, okay, twitter.com. You can also take a look at us on Instagram. We do take Instagram photos and we put them up all over the place, _EarbudU on Instagram. We also have our website for our parent company, HS Consulting and Training, so www.hsconsultingandtraining.com. And, of course, check out HS Consulting and Training's website, Human Services Consulting and Training, on Facebook. Thank you very much, Shalin, for taking the time to talk with us again. We had a great time talking with you.
Okay. And I've also enjoyed talking with you, too.
Absolutely. Awesome. And you all have a great day.